Some say he left Johannesburg chasing opportunity and found himself chasing Norwegians up frozen hills. Some say he measures hills in heartbeats, not meters.
That's true.
Some say he only picked up skis 3 years ago and somehow turned it into an Olympic qualification. All we know is he's Matsi, South Africa's Snowbok, and this is his diary to the Winter Olympics. Matt, welcome to Team South Africa podcast.
Thank you for having me. What a welcome. And we're sitting here in beautiful Cape Town, and I feel at home.
That's good to hear that. Good to hear that. It is home.
Yeah.
So, Joburg boy?
Joburg boy, born in Joburg. Spent quite a bit of time in the UK. Family left in the late 90s. But you know, you can take the boy out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of the boy.
Yeah. So here we are, sitting in Cape Town, middle of summer, and you are preparing for the Winter Olympics.
I am.
How does that sentence land?
It's a bit of a juxtaposition when I'm looking out at beautiful Millie Point promenade walk here. And you know, only a few years ago I was living here, running along the waterfront here, loving life in beautiful southern Africa. Now I'm coming from minus 10 degrees, skiing in blizzards literally yesterday before I arrived. So it's a real sort of juxtaposition, but it feels uniquely right, given South Africa's sporting history and proudness, that we should have representation in winter sports, and I'm happy to carry the flag for that.
So I think as most young South African boys, we always dreamt of growing up and wearing the green and gold of the Springboks. How does it feel to be known as the Snowbok?
It's, you know, as you said, I grew up around the Springboks. You know, I've been to many of the World Cups. I was there in Paris in 2007, I think it was, when we beat England. You know, and I've just grown up around the excellence around sport that is the Springboks, right? And those dreams of being a Springbok, or being actually just representing, you're getting your colours for South Africa, right? I come from a sporting family as well, and that is something I grew up around, the honour of representing South Africa in a sport. And the reality is, you know, I'm 35 today. Unless you start in a sport at 2 years old, you're never going to make it. And you know, even if you're one of the lucky few to have the right genetics, to have the right support network around you, the right system, you still might not make it. So I'm living in a different life. I'm almost seeing my life from above when I realized that at the age of 32, I started the journey in cross-country skiing. And now I'm going to represent South Africa at the Olympics. And I won't be a Springbok, but I will take the Snowbok.
You know, it's quite interesting when you talk about the genetics and all of those things.
Yeah.
The chances of playing for your country are so slim. You know, there's been, if my maths is correct, I think there's been 984 people that have been a Springbok.
Really?
Since 1896.
That's less than I would have expected. Wow.
So the maths just doesn't matter.
Not in your favour, no.
But I think you're the 11th Winter Olympian.
That's amazing. I know. There've actually been a couple of us, right? 7 games I think we've been to. I was the first to qualify for this games. First time in, I think, 8 years we would have gone to the games. And you know what the exciting thing is, Goodwill, is that, you know, when I began this journey and I contacted Sascock, who then introduced me to Snow Sports South Africa, newsflash, we have a snow sports division. It's called Snow Sports South Africa. Peter Pils and Sonia, they do a fantastic job, very knowledgeable. But you can imagine there's not too many South Africans who hit them up every now and then and say, hey, listen, I'm going to try and qualify for the nation. And I begun this journey and I discovered this whole world of winter sports, and we are very underrepresented there. However, I will say one thing, and I want to hold the flag for us, because I'm not the only one. I was the first to qualify for this games. We have Lara Markthaler. I think she's been on the pod as well. She's been here to visit. She qualified in alpine skiing. We also have 3 others, and it's looking like they're going to qualify. We have Anton Bosch in snowboarding. We have Melika Malherbe in moguls. And we also have Nicole Berger, who has just won 2 podiums recently. I think she's probably the first South African to podium, apart from Lara, in a sport. So South Africa, all of a sudden, is having its moment in winter sport. And I think more South Africans need to learn about this. Because I believe that we are a sporting nation which could transfer many sports. Like you said, triathlon. We're dominant in triathlon. Jamie Riddle. We've had many triathletes. Schoeman, that's the one. He's a medalist, right? But we have a lot of South African triathletes, as I was, who could transfer into cross-country skiing because I did that transfer, and it's a very complementary sport. So I think South Africa has a lot of unmet potential when it comes to winter sports. So I may be the first Snowbok, but I don't think I'll be the last. I hope.
So if you had to describe this moment in your journey as a diary entry title, what would you call it?
It's never too late, right? I think that's a narrative in this, because I've given up, as many rightfully would and should when you're in your 30s, of dreaming about representing your country, right? That dream is a pipe dream, and I managed to achieve it. And it just goes to show that, with the right support network, the right focus, a lot of things going in your favor, but also I've engineered that in my favor, it can be done.
Yeah, and we'll get back to that, because I think that's a super fascinating part of your story. But let's go back.
Okay.
Right? Joburg born.
Yeah.
First 8 years of your life, living in the hustle and bustle of the city. What sport did you do? Where were you?
I think an easier question is, what sport didn't I do? Because that'd be a shorter list. I think my youth was very characterized by all sports, jack of all, right? Playing cricket, playing hockey, playing rugby, of course. So I think it was touch rugby at that age, right? Swimming, all the typical South African dominant sports. And I was just, I think, to credit to my parents and the people I was around, exposed me to all sports. But also, I think something that's very important and not spoken about enough in the seriousness of professional sports, I enjoyed it. And for me, the focus was enjoyment before performance. And I think that's been a characteristic throughout my life, which I've learned now, having lived in Norway for 7 years, is Norway's sporting narrative. Now, if you look at today, Norway has one of the most dominant sporting nations. Obviously in winter sport, we know that, but also now we're seeing that in summer sports. With the Ingebrigtsen brothers, who are now the 50-meter world champions, world record holders. We have triathletes, Blumenthal, who won in Tokyo, and so many other sports. And the recipe to Norway's 5 million population to success is joy. Find joy in the thing you're doing. And all too often as professional athletes, and especially as youth athletes, the focus is on performance, getting your colors, getting to the next national level, etc., right? We focus on performance, we forget the joy in the process, and then that's why I think some burnt out. So I think, to answer your question, really, it comes down to, I was encouraged to enjoy the sport, not take any too seriously. Maybe I should have had someone push me into one. Maybe I would have been earlier and better and got my colors sooner in something else. But I think joy in sport is something that should be programmed like your training sessions, like your heart rate sessions, like your intervals, etc. Because I think that's a recipe for success, and Norway has proven that as a nation.
Yeah. And I think, there's also an interesting point that you raised, though, that I think in certain areas, there's certain sports that have gotten too professional too early.
Very true.
So kids are not picking up the multi-event, multi-skills challenges, and you're finding that a lot of us at a sort of older age, we're exposed to a lot of things that are advantages. So the ability to play tennis that personally I could transfer to rugby.
There you go.
Is one of those things where now I'm finding guys at 12 years old saying, I want to focus, I want to train, I want to be a Springbok, and you're right. Sometimes
Singularity, yeah.
But it can also take the joy away, turn it into a job too soon without the fun.
That's a great narrative, turning it into a job too soon, because what I've learned by being a multifaceted athlete is that, like you quite rightly said, I learned that triathlon translated quite interestingly and surprisingly into cross-country skiing. Cardiovascular, same system, but also it's a holistic sport. It's full body, right? Triathlon, you're swimming, you're running, you're cycling, you need a core strength. Cross-country skiing, you're using all 4 limbs in coordination at any one point, right? There's not a technique transfer, but there's a lot of skill transfer. And as you said as well, mobility in youth, if you are doing tennis, like you said, right, can pay off in not getting injured later down the line in rugby, being a winger, for example, and having that strength and mobility to pivot off your ankles at speed, right? Versus crumbling because you've done one thing, one groove. If you move that person to another sport, they crumble immediately because they can't run sideways, they can only run forward. I got a funny thing just to add because it's hilarious. I have a podcast called Countdown to Cortina, right? And I interviewed the 3-time world record holder from Lillehammer 94 Olympics, Johan Olive Koss. You just reminded me of this. And he said he was a speed skater for 20 years before he retired, Olympic gold medalist, four gold medals. And when he tried to become a hockey player afterwards in Canada, he couldn't skate to the right, because he'd gone in a circle to the left for 20 years. So that was a joke. His body just couldn't go to the right. He struggled he'd injured himself because his body was so lopsided.
Yeah, so it's actually fascinating because what you find in the athletic space.
Yeah.
So, we got the silver medal in Paris for the 4x1.
We did.
And when you watch the narrative on social and people are like, why didn't this guy run? And you go, people don't understand the difference between running straight and running a corner. So, the amazing skill of being able to look at athletes like in Usain Bolt, for instance, 100 and 200 running. So you can corner and straight.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as going, you can go from first leg to second leg just because you're fast.
Yeah.
It's a completely different sport. So I understand that, and I know as well where you do a lot of linear work.
Yeah.
And then you have to step. And I managed to do my ACL from
I'm sorry to hear that.
playing rugby.
Yeah.
Went and started running, road running, and then played touch rugby.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're asking limbs to do things I haven't done in years.
No.
And those injuries happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a thing. But I wanted to know, because it's quite funny going through your Instagram and you're very proud of South Africa.
Oh yeah.
And for someone who left at a young age, I know you've been back and you spoke about family and Heart Day and that, but how have you kept that Insansi spirit going?
I don't think I've needed to keep it going. It's a fire that's never gone out, if I'm honest with you. And maybe I credit to, when we moved to the UK, we moved to a South African area, right? The area where I grew up in with the De Koks, the Van der Westhazens, the Burrows, all these family friends I grew up with children the same age as myself and my sister. My father was at UCT with, or was working with at, Investec, right? South African company. So I maintained the environment. You are a product of your environment. And I'll be honest with you, as a child growing up, as a South African boy growing up in the UK, the only thing I think I've gained from the UK, other than a respect for the education I was given and that system, etc., is a British accent, unfortunately. But I maintained this South Africanness in every sense of the word, the bright culture, the camaraderie, and that's something I've now felt that when living in the UK, I didn't feel British, I felt South African. But when I come back to South Africa, I don't fully feel South African because I almost feel like a fraud because I've been away for so long. However, I still feel South African, So I'm very grateful to have reconnected with my culture later in life. And I made an active decision 5 years ago to move back as an adult, under my own steam, not on holiday with my parents, getting my own apartment. And I lived in Cape Town for almost a year. And got into South African sporting culture, with Embark Tri Club, and I did the South African Ironman in Port Elizabeth and a few others around Cape Town as well. So then I started to really relearn and reconnect with what it is to be South African. And I think as an adult, I've reconnected, reappreciated what it is to be South African in every sense of that word. And now when I'm in Norway, I'm proudly South African. And I think that's the funny thing. When I was in the UK, I was proudly South African. When I'm in Norway, I'm proudly South African. When I'm South Africa, I'm proudly South African, but I'm a little bit quieter because I feel like I need to sort of still earn my stripes, right? And that's where I think I'm doing that through this. I've always carried the flag in the nations I've been, and I love the comment I get when I'm skiing. They often say, they'll say in Norwegian, they say, "Nei, du kommer fra South-Africa? Serious? No, you come from South Africa? Seriously?" That's the comment I get a lot, right? And given that I've been proactive in building a personal brand and putting South Africa at the front and center of that, being the South African athlete, the one thing they notice as you go around the ski track, so you don't see a face, but you see the suit and the name. So I'm very proud to represent the suit and the name that I put on. It's like my armor, my suit of armor. When I put that on, I might as well be, Akani Simbine, or I might as well be, FAFTA clerk or something like that. I kind of take on that role, and I hope, and I think so, shine South Africa in the best light by the way I conduct myself, both on the course and specifically off the course.
So talk us through the first winter in Norway.
Yeah. So I moved back to Norway. I'd lived there before, but I'll tell you my first experiences of winter in Norway, right? So winter comes around this time of year. We're recording this at the end of the year, December time. And winter doesn't come, it arrives on the doorstep with meaning and staying power, right? 2 meters of snow until they clear all the roads, you're kind of snowed in. And in Norway, they have a beautiful saying, which is there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing, right? Because the first experience you have is you don't understand that you have to wear wool under your jeans. That's a mistake I made in the beginning. And I think the biggest thing I had to learn was how to walk on snow and ice. This is not something you learn. The promenade will not help you, right? The prom walks won't help you there. So I had to learn how to walk on ice. And actually, how you walk on ice, you learn from nature. You learn from penguins. Because you kind of have lower shoulders, you kind of bend a little in the knee, a little bit in the hips, you lower your center of gravity, you kind of compact the body a bit, and you shuffle with your arms forward. So if you ever go to Norway, or anywhere in Scandinavia for that matter, northern hemisphere, and you see people shuffling like they're, maybe a little bit of a hunchback. No, that's just how people have to walk to not fall on snow, right? I made that mistake, I had the bruises and the bumps to prove it, but over time I learned to shuffle on ice, to walk on snow, and then I learned that the saying there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing needs another parallel, because you have two options. As an athletic person, wanting to try all sports and do all sports, outside preferably, you can't do that in winter unless you're brave enough to run on snow and ice with studs in your tires or your shoes. I'm not brave enough to do that, I hate the cold. So you have two options. You hibernate, which is a valid option. You light a fire, you get some red wine, you light the braai inside, whatever you want to do, and you just chill out for the next 6 months until winter leaves you. Or you lean in. Now I'm more of a lean inner, so I decided to lean in. And in leaning in, what do the Norwegians do when it's bad weather? They go skiing. So I learned to go out skiing, and that's where I begun this journey. And I'll pause the story there, but I will leave you with a cliffhanger, which is the first person who taught me to cross-country Nordic ski wasn't a Norwegian, wasn't a Swede, wasn't a Finn, wasn't a Canadian, was a Mexican. So believe it or not, Mexico and South Africa, I know we just drew the same pool, I think pool A for the football, for the World Cup. We also have a real bromance, a sporting bromance when it comes to cross-country skiing, because my inspiration to start this journey was you can't be what you can't see. And I saw a Mexican representing Mexico in cross-country skiing, thought to myself, well, why can't I represent South Africa in cross-country skiing? And that was the beginning of my journey when I first winter and moved to Norway.
So it was quite funny, earlier I was thinking that you're the only person who could take a positive out of Corona.
Nice one. Very true, very true.
Yeah, so, but we'll get onto that. Let's go into the business stage.
Yeah.
That's going to set us up onto that point. Obviously, you studied, got your degree. Feels like follow dad's steps.
As many do, yes.
So, what was your degree? Where did you go into?
So I was growing up in the UK at the time, and I did 2 degrees, an undergrad in economics, a postgrad in investment banking, really, and in corporate finance. And in hindsight, wrongfully pursued a career in what my career was in, which was finance. I'm not a finance boy. But I pursued that because that's what many young do when they look up to those around them. That was the environment I was in, was a sort of finance environment. No regrets. I got a great education from it. And I started my career in venture capital, which actually was quite a fun experience because venture capital is investing in tech companies. So I kind of fell accidentally into the world of tech and entrepreneurship by investing in tech companies. I, thank God, didn't sell my soul and go work for a bank, which is the path I was on at the time. No disrespect to that. But it wasn't the path that was set for me. So I started working in venture capital. I was very fortunate to start my first career in a corporate venture fund investing in tech companies. And that exposed me to this wonderful world of innovation and entrepreneurship, right? Which is sort of this unique world on the side of, but not really too associated to finance, right? And that really began my career. And I can give you the highlight. Did that for 2 years. Was fortunate to invest in some quite successful tech companies in Europe at the time. This is out of London. And then that transferred my career into the world of entrepreneurship. I was given a great opportunity to launch a big startup called Style.com. And that was a big fiasco. I can tell you about that in another podcast, but you live and you learn from failure, and that was a big experience on that side. At this point in my life, I'm in my early 20s, to give you some context. Sports are a part of my life, but not my life. Always part of running and gymming, but I had a career. I'd given up on the Springbok dream, on representing South Africa and anything at this point. So then that's when I moved to Norway originally the first time, when I started my first startup. Raised some money. It was in the media space, and I was very fortunate to build that company and sell that company in 2020. That's the highlight reel of that business.
Amazing. So, but even before then, though, your brain doesn't feel like it was a very straight finance-driven brain. Because I believe you did quite an interesting dissertation on.
Oh, you've done your research.
The correlation between. Let me see if I can get this right.
Wow.
The correlation
I'm
between
impressed.
social trends and the stock market.
Social media sentiment, correct. Wow, I'm very impressed. You've done your research. So you're right, and I've never connected the dots there, by the way. This is it's always good when you have like a wow moment on a podcast for the guest, right? But that's very true. Yeah, I did my undergrad and postgrad thesis on social media sentiment, meaning can you predict stock trends by how people are speaking about things on social media, which was proven to be true. The market is driven by people's opinions of the market and businesses. So if you can predict how people have opinions based on social media of things, you can predict the market. Yeah, I've never connected the dots. Very well researched. I'm impressed.
Thank you. And that takes me to another point then of, in that same, let me call it strange way of your mind working, or fascinating way that your mind works, is did you feel like you could write the formula to being an Olympic?
Interesting question. I'll answer that in two parts. One, yes, I'm contrarian. I've always felt against the grain, and I'll tell you why. Because growing up as a young boy in South Africa, I was diagnosed, if you will, with dyslexia when I moved to the UK. But I'd always grown up with a perspective that I'm not intelligent, actually. Because when you have a fish on land, the fish struggles to run as an animal on land does, right? If you put an animal on land in the ocean, they can't swim. So I think I felt very much a fish out of water as a child growing up. And I always found another way to perform and show my strengths in contrarian ways, right? Which was going against the grain. I fell into the groove of going with the grain for a period, studying and starting to work. But that innate part of me, maybe to psychoanalyze it from being a child with dyslexia and feeling a bit unintelligent or not feeling like I fitted in, I had to find other ways to stand out. And ironically, I made a career out of as being a public speaker in media as someone who has a communication, disability. It's kind of ironic how I made that weakness my strength and now is my income, really. So that's the one, the contrarian side of it. But yeah, drawing that parallel to finding a formula, right? For me, how I managed to do this Olympics in 3 years, but it's actually 2 years because you qualified in 2. It starts with the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. The inspiration, the Mexican doing it. Why can't I do this for us? Does anyone represent us? No. How does one begin to represent us? I understood that. To qualify for the Olympics for South Africa in a sport I'd never tried in 2 years, because it was 2 years to qualify, I had 700 days. And I broke those 700 days down, I guess you could say formulaically, into key minutes and key moments. Now the key minutes are the 1,000 hours, right? You can't cheat the system. You can't just rock up, find a few hacks and go. No, you have to put time on snow. I had to make up, I was 32 at the time, my peers, iPhone batteries, rich, for quite weapon. No worries, I needed to, my peers had been skiing since they were 2 years old, 20 years of experience, so 15, 20 years of experience to make sure. You can't make up that by a couple of, cheat codes. That doesn't exist, right? So I had to spend time on snow, making the errors that you need to make to learn. You learn through failure, right? So there was a huge amount of time I needed to spend on snow, and that was the easy sessions. That was just going out and specifically having fun, because you know how the Norwegians learn to ski? They learn to ski as children by having fun. They play football I should say soccer, because I'm back home. Yeah. They play soccer on skis, right?
they take their poles off and they try to play touch rugby basically, touch soccer. So I needed to learn to play on skis, to learn balance, to learn body position, etc. Right, which is very difficult as an adult. So that's the key minutes that I need to invest. Now the key moments. Now this is where I think the formula comes in. I reverse engineered the time I needed to get, or the time under I needed to get, in the race that I was going to race. I knew the race. I had one shot, one opportunity, the 26th of February, 2025. Now I'm starting now, beginning of 2023. I have 2 years, 700 days. There's not that many snow days either, by the way. It's more like 400 snow days or less than that. So you need to work with what you have. What I needed to realize was, around the course, on the day of the race, I need to get a certain time. And there's certain ways to gain time in a race. And that's how you carry momentum into corners. So what I realized was I needed to make sure that in this specific corner of this specific course, which I knew pretty well, I need to take this line. And then to take this line, I need this body position. Well, at the beginning, I just fell on my ass, obviously, right? So how do I learn to be good enough to take this corner at that speed? Then how do I need to learn to take this corner out? What body position do I need to be in? What technique do I need to learn and perfect to make sure I get up this hill in 13 seconds, to make sure that I take the next hill in 15 seconds, so that now I'm on track to get a time that will qualify South Africa and myself in the process for the Olympics. So I'd broken down the key moments. Now these key moments, to be reverse engineered, are fast cornering, up a hill in the paddle position, the right body position, right? So I knew these leapfrog technique things I needed to focus on. So I did. I worked on the low-hanging fruit, biggest time gains first. I didn't train as you would as a child. I played a bit, sure, but I didn't start with basics. I started with the lowest hanging fruit, leapfrog moments, right? And every time I'd master one of those, I would jump 7 levels. And I was very specific. So we joked earlier about, specificity, right? And being a very singular athlete. I'm a very singular skier. I'm a 10K distance specialist. That's why my sprint times are quite bad. That's why my long distance times are quite bad. Comparatively, because I had 2 years to get the qualification, I needed to focus specifically on a race, specifically on a course, specifically on a time. So that's what I've done, versus being a more holistic skier. Now, after the Olympics, I have time to be more of a holistic skier. That's how I formulaically broke down qualifying for the Olympics in 2 years. I focused all my time and attention on only things that matter, and not focusing on things that didn't.
What drew you into the 10K as opposed to hey, I'm scared, let's give this thing a bash, everything?
I have done everything, but as training, not as actual serious racing. And my points reflect that, because the 10K is the wrong word is easiest, but the 10K is the smartest race to go for, because it's the right distance, the courses are the right technicality, and in the time frame I had, ironically, sprinting, which is only 1.5 kilometers, takes 3 minutes. You need a higher level of skill to get around a sprint course in a shorter time frame. And long distance, 50Ks, which you would think would fit me, having been a triathlete beforehand, which take up to 2 hours, also then require a specific amount of skill to be skiing at the lowest economy to maximize your efficiency over time, right? The 10K is the best balance of speed, power, endurance, and time. Because the 10K takes anything from 22 to 30 minutes, 22 to 32 minutes. So it was the right balance, what my biokinetical structure could do, what my time could allow me to do, and was the best chances of qualifying South Africa for the Olympics. That's why we went for that. We made an educated, calculated guess on what we thought was the right race to go for, and that it was the right race to go for.
But it also feels like even at race day you were quite calculated, because I believe that there was a 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So the
cutoff was roughly 5 minutes. Yeah.
Roughly 5 minutes. Winning guys at 20. You're coming in at 24:30 something.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's
with the fall, because something made for a movie, in the race, I go and fall and break a pole, which is usually game over. It's game over. You fall and break a pole in the race. I lost about 50 seconds. They calculated. I managed to recover, and that's really where you prove who you are, because I'd worked it on my mindset, and my mindset saved me, not my physique, not my technique. My mindset saved me in that race.
So how close were you to not qualifying?
Good question. Well, you can look at the times. I think it was roughly just under a minute off from not qualifying, right? Which actually is quite a substantial buffer, actually. So I made it with a nice margin, to be honest with you. I would have actually made it with quite a more substantial margin, which would have been cool. But I had this. I fell. It was a just simple accident, which could have happened to anyone, but it happened to me, of course. But again, I stood up and I made it, which is what matters.
Yeah. I like the mental thing, because I think that's huge. Our minds are so powerful. But what does a typical hard training day look like?
A double session, and it would typically be waking up, doing intervals in the morning after a nice little breakfast, being with my son for a bit, leaving the house, and then I'll do intervals, right? So typically I will right now do either, as the snow is there, I'll go to the ski stadium, which is called Holmenkollen, which will accumulate up to 1,000 meters of elevation on a 2.5 kilometer course over, and I'll do that, 1,000 total cumulative meters gained. And I'll maybe do one lap of the stadium, it'll take me 5 minutes or so, something like that. I will do intervals in sprints I'll do 5 times 5 minutes with a break in between. I will race pace with a goal of trying to get my heart rate slightly above thresholds. I can get into the details if you like, towards the last 2. And then with 30-minute warm-up before, 30-minute warm-up afterwards, the intervals take roughly 30 minutes plus, right? So you're still there for 90 plus minutes or so, 30 minutes of solid interval time where you're crossing the finish line, barely being able to stand on your legs, right? And that's more so just the fatigue and then lactate buildup. I'll take a lactate measure as well to try and keep my lactate at a specific level. And then I'll go home, I'll limp home, I will eat immediately and probably have a nap. And then I'll have a little snack before I go out again. I'll head out for anything from 2 to 3 hours of a lower intensity, but longer volume session for the day. So total training time, 4.5, 5 hours. With, if you add on all the other elements, you're looking at a 7-8 hour training day, basically, right? And then you can imagine when bedtime comes, past 8 p.m. on a zombie of a person, right? So that's a hard training session. Occasionally I will do a double interval day if I'm doing a test race. Typically what we'll do is I'll do intervals in the morning, and then all the other way around. Test race in the morning, and then intervals in the afternoon, or intervals in the morning and a test race in the afternoon. Test race will be 25, 30 minutes, right? So again, specificity is the key and the answer to me making it. To anyone, I think, trying to follow in my footsteps, I've got the blueprint. Come and see me. I'm very happy to share that with you.
Yeah, go.
I mean, that sounds grueling.
Oh yeah.
But so you have that. We can deal with that.
Yeah.
You're an elite athlete. You're spending 7 hours at work, basically.
It's work.
But you're a dad to a 7-month.
Correct.
So with that, I'm going to ask you, what's been the toughest moments you've had?
The toughest moments I've had are probably not the moments that I've lived. It's the moments that the people around me have lived as a result of the life that I live. Right? I don't think we give enough credit to, I think it was Muhammad Ali who famously said, he was being interviewed much like this. He was asked, the training, it sounds so tough, it must be so hard. And he said, no, that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is saying no to everything else. It's saying no to the friends, the family, the events, the parties, the whatever you want to name it. That's the hardest part. And I would add to that, I think the hardest price that is paid for being a professional athlete isn't paid by you. It's paid by your friends and your families around them who support you in ways to make your life easier. To make you that coffee in the morning, to take the burden of other things that are commonplace amongst cleaning the house, cleaning the dishes, cleaning the clothing. Do you know how much clothing is involved to clean as a professional athlete, training twice a day? In winter, we wear 5 times as much clothes as you do when you're running along the practice. So the true price is not paid by you, it's paid by others. And I think that's a message I'd like to share, and it's something I think needs more acknowledgement as a professional athlete. So to come back to your, what's been the hardest moments? The hardest moments have been seeing those around me having hard times with what I'm doing, but realizing that I can't just jump off the train. It is a singular dream, it's a singular focus. There's national pride involved, there's personal pride involved, all of the above, right? So the hardest part has been, I have to be completely honest with you. There's part of me that looks forward to being relieved after this. There's part of me that feels that, and I've thought about the speech I'm going to give to the friends, and I have 30 friends and family flying from South Africa, flying from the US, flying from all around Europe to come to the Olympics, and you're all invited, by the way. To Milano Cortina, to Predazzo, to Lago di Tercero, my races on the 13th of February, and I'm going to organize a dinner something like that afterwards for everyone. And I want to say to all of them, I'm going to open with this. Honestly, I thought about this. My speech to say thank you is, firstly, I want to apologize to you for the way I've been for the last 3 years. Because the truth is, this is what it takes, and this is the cost, and I know that many of you paid that cost. So thank you for paying that cost, you're all still here. So the hardest cost that's been the hardest part, if I'm honest with you. And then the last part of that, to come to your point about having a family and having children, is during this process, the hardest part has been, sleep. You understand when you have sleep deprivation as a new parent, why sleep is torture. Sleep deprivation is a torture and the most effective torture to human beings, right? And the one physiological burden you have as an athlete is fatigue. And the one thing I didn't count was build-up of lagged fatigue, and the sort of in the shadow that lagged fatigue over time can build up, and that's where burnout can happen. And my son was born in May, the ski season finished in April, we timed it perfectly. Look at us, hey, right? But obviously, skiers are made in summer, by the way, because you have to put your aerobic volume, long distance, low heart rate training in summer, which takes a lot of time, more time than intervals. So I tried to maintain some level of professional athletic training whilst having a newborn, whilst trying to assist my fiancée as much as possible, of course, being a good new dad, being a good partner to her. Of course, we had a balance, and she also took a bit more of the burden at times. But I didn't account for the lagged fatigue built up. So come end of summer, I had a bit of work travel, and I came back to Norway, and I couldn't train for a week. I had something inside of me that I'd never felt, which basically just said no, and I spoke about this on social media. I didn't account for I trained a bit less, I slept a bit less. I thought negating either would balance it out a bit, but no. Sleep debt had built up, and with sleep debt comes lack of recovery. So now I had this lack of recovery that not even my watch could track, not even all the data I use that we all have, these Garmin's, these heart rate monitors, could not monitor. And I'm sure, of course, you could look at heart rate variability and some statistics, but ultimately I hit a wall. Thank God I noticed it before, and I had to take a break of 10 days of training to recoup some of the recovery. So that was the physiologically most difficult part, and I spoke about the emotional and psychological part, which is those who bear the cost, not you.
It's a horrible one. I mean, I also think back, I was chatting to my wife about this with some of the rugby players, a guy like Jean de Villiers, who's had probably 6 big ones, and
6 big kids, or
six big knee off,
okay, geez,
and multiple ACLs, just like a long-term recovery. And she reminded me of what a horrible person I was, because you go into such a dark place, but you don't know you're being dark. And the ones that are closest to you, that are trying to fix you, like help you recover, become your emotional punching bags. And it's nice.
I was talking to a good friend, because we have a sporting relationship and a rivalry with Australia, but believe it or not, it also exists in cross-country skiing. And I was sitting down with Lars Youngvik, who is an Australian cross-country skier, an Olympian from Beijing 22. We were in the sauna the other day. I was chatting to him about pre-Olympic jitters. Did you feel that before Beijing? Looking for some advice. And the thing we spoke about was actually this, and he perfectly described it. Google Earth.
Take that.
You can't be a great athlete without being a good human first. And we live in an era where it's athlete at all costs. And we're seeing the negative effect of that in many ways, right? I think sustainability as an athlete is made more possible if you focus on also being a good human first. Now, I'm not saying going out jaws every weekend and joining your body's rise on Sundays and Fridays, and having a few beers, right? No, I'm talking about still maintaining some balance, but also balance doesn't come on a daily perspective. Balance comes over time. There are phases where you need to focus on blocks of training, blocks of something you're working on. But one thing we don't communicate to others around us enough as athletes is, hey, listen, darling, partner, friends. And I did this to my friends after I learned the hard way. I said, hey, listen, by the way, we're going into the World Championships, which is the beginning of this year. You're going to hear from me less. You're going to write to me and I'm not going to respond. I love you and I'm sorry. This is a point in my life where I'm not going to be the best communication version of Matt. I'm not going to be the best friend version of Matt. I'm still here. I will come back. But right now I need to be the best athlete version of myself. And balance is an illusion with periods of time like that. However, when you zoom out over the quarter and over the half year and over the year, I will have balanced periods where I will focus over summer. I said to my fiance, listen, this period, I'm going to give to you and the baby. We're going to take a break of training as much, a couple of hours here and there if I could, but this is that. And I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to own that. I'm going to be the best version right now of me and what's needed of me. Athletes don't need to be athletes every second of every day. You need to also think about I spoke earlier about the 6-7 hours of training. How are you for the other 17, 18 hours during the day? That's a question we don't ask ourselves enough of. How much of that do we give to ourselves? Do we invest in others around us? But also, lastly, we need to communicate to those around us. Hey, FYI, going into an interval block, going to be a little bit more hungry than usual, going to be a little bit more hangry, irritable than usual. So if I'm not myself, feel free to call me out occasionally, but also realize that I probably just need to quote Mr. T, I probably just need a Snickers, mind bar. We can sponsor this episode now. Yeah.
So, as we're coming into closing, take us through, can imagine what day one I'm going to the Olympics, excitement, and then probably reality of, you don't just say I'm going, there's things that you have to do. But through this journey, how's your perspective on success changed?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. And I'll give my best to give an okay answer, but when you are starting a sport late in life, and you are competing against those who are doing it their entire life, the reality is, I'm unlikely to win a medal. I've tried. But the beauty about the position I'm in and those around me are in, who've qualified, but are fighting for the middle of the pack maybe, the bottom of the pack maybe, trying for the top, but is that I can adjust what success looks like to me. And success to me, from all of this, is how can I stand for something more than just myself? How can I represent something more than just myself? And success for me in this journey has evolved to, how can I leave cross-country skiing in a better place than when I got it? And, it might sound a bit braggadocious, but I don't mean it to sound like that, but, I have been in the sport for 3 years, and I brought a different perspective to it, because as we said, I was an entrepreneur and businessman for 10 years before that. So I brought in a whole perspective of how to build a personal brand, how to work with businesses, and how to represent being an athlete that is more than their results. Because my results, I can't promise you that I'm going to win podiums and medals, but I can promise you that I'm going to win hearts and minds through my messaging, through standing for something, through trying to uplift others with me around the process. So success for me has been less so about positioning and more so about who am I outside and what do I represent outside of being an athlete, and how can I encourage others to see all the benefits of focusing on the things outside of being an athlete that contribute to being a better athlete. Like I said, you can't be a great athlete without being a good human first, right? So success to me is leaving cross-country skiing in a better place than when I got it, through being an advocate for athletes to learn to live from what they love. Cross-country skiing is not a money sport. Most of them, they're barely scrape by, but they also don't understand how to work with and build a personal brand, to then work with, build relationships with other sporting brands. So I, as this unlikely South African athlete who's come along with the experience that I have used my position and my experience to help others. And that has been my quote-unquote legacy, if you will, if you could call 3 years in the sport a legacy, is that I'm one of the most followed cross-country skiers. In 3 years, I'm one of the most followed cross-country skiers on social media, because I have 3 brand values: to educate, to entertain, and to inspire. So I have educational videos. Who would have thought cross-country skiing needed a South African to teach them about how to put ski bindings on? But guess what? It's got 300,000 views, you know? Who knew that the world needed this? But guess what? It has become that. So I think, you know, I have represented what good looks like as an athlete in the sport. Caveat, I haven't won any podiums just yet, but I will still continue to try to. So yeah, listen, that's what success looks like to me from being an athlete, from this journey. Is I can proudly say that I've actually changed the sport for the better, and that's reflected, and I'm saying this, and many of you listening to this won't have any context of what I mean, and in the sport you'd understand, but you know, I've built a brand in the sports by shaking the sport up a little bit, showing what good looks like on Instagram and on TikTok and on LinkedIn, by uplifting others, because the sport is very Nordic dominated. And we need more small nations to bring more colour into the sport, more flavour into the sport, more character into the sport. Otherwise, it has the risk of just becoming a Nordic sport. It might as well just be called Norwegian skiing. It's already called Nordic skiing, right? And the more flavours we bring into the sport, the more cultures we bring into the sport, the more the sport grows by these individuals. And the more awareness the sport grows, the more people might try the sport. So the more businesses might come into the sport as a result. And right now is a very poignant time because the sport is an all-time low. I came into the sport at an almost, you know, perfect time in the sense that the sport's viewership is at an all-time low, sponsorships are at an all-time low, less athletes getting into it professionally because there's no opportunity as a professional. So, yeah, long way to answer the question. Forgive me for that, but I have realised that I have a place in the sport, even though I'm not a contender for that. Actually, me and the others around me who are doing the same have a place in the sport. Because if we just leave it to those who are currently doing it the way that things going, the sport may not survive.
Yeah, I really like that because there's a lot of perspective that's needed. I'll give you an example. I said to people, we were in the Olympic Village for Paris.
Yeah.
And people said, like, how was it? Yeah, it must have been amazing. And I said, it's the strangest environment. The opening day of the village is the most amazing day. And then you've never felt a darker place. What a really? Dreams are getting broken on a daily basis, right? There's only 300 medals out of 10,000 or whatever, right? There's a lot of people that are down. I mean, we had one of our gymnasts was she was literally she was performing just after Simone Biles was like, and she injured herself. And I ended up in the lift, and I'd gotten to do quite a lot of work with her before, so I knew her. And I've never felt so awkward because I didn't know what to say. She's on crutches, and the dream's broken, and we're just in this lift, and there's this heavy dense energy. But I know it's not something that makes athletes feel better. But for me, the perspective was like there were 10,000 people in that village, and out of 6-8 billion people on the planet. And put that into perspective, how special you are, you know, again, I think we focus so much about winning as opposed to going, you've made it.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting that tattoo.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's the timestamp for life. And I'll add to that, which is, I realized this recently, and I said this to a friend of mine who was from Peru, you know, the beautiful relationships I've made during this journey has been a gift. And I realized this, he finished and he was a bit disappointed. And I said, listen, Victor is his name. Victor, you'll never really, and this is not an important race really, it could have been good if you got good points, but I said, listen, Victor, you know, in a couple of years' time, you're not even going to remember the position you came and the time you got in the race, but you will always remember who you finished the finish line, across the finish line with. You will always remember who you finished the cross line with. Sorry, say that again. Victor, you will never remember the time you got in the position you came in the race, but you will always remember who you crossed the finish line with, and I think that's a great perspective to have. Caveat, we do need those trying to set world records and going for gold, right? But you know, I've been around the current GOAT Federer of cross-country skiing quite a bit, Johannes Klopp. He is the all-time great by quite a margin. He's only 28. He's Norwegian. And I've been around him at a few races, and I tried to talk to him the other day, and it's like he didn't exist. And I told my ego that it's because he had headphones and I couldn't tell. Make it a bit softer. But this guy is in the zone. And that's what he needs. And he is the world champion, and he is the Olympic champion. He's going to be that. But I have to also question, a lot of us are like, hey, we're good to see you, we're chit-chatting, we're having fun. Business time comes, we race, we do our best we can, right? He was there, no chit-chatter, no this, no focus, this. And I think, we see this with some top athletes, and maybe that's what it takes, right? He is winning, but he's only winning by a few fractions of a second. So I also question that. Is it worth those fractions of a second? Versus the girls who are coming second, third, fourth, fifth, and that's still having a great time, and still living and loving the sport, right? So, I think we're in an era where we are seeing that you are more than your results, and I very positively been an advocate for that. And I think just to validate the things I said earlier about me becoming a character in the sport, I'm the first non-World Cup regular starting athlete to be signed by the best World Cup team. It's like being signed by Chelsea in the Premier League, but actually not being a Premier League player. And the reason I was signed by the team Arkadali is purely because of all my efforts and what I stand for off the field. And they want to bring that into the sport and to their team. So I've actually developed, and I'm going to make this open to all, a athlete development, personal development program. I'm making this for Arkadali right now for our athletes to help them become personal brands and learn to live from what they love from the sports. And I was riding on the plane on the way here yesterday, and I'm going to make that public around Christmas or so. And that's going to be open to all. It's across any sport, and it's just what I've used coming full circle back to sort of the blueprint, right? That blueprint. And a lot of why I've succeeded, I think, is also because I have not just had some golden system. There is no cheat code. You can't cheat the years and the efforts. You can be smart about what you train on and how you train. But the thing that I've done differently to many is that I've spoken loudly about it from the beginning. The more people I've told, the more people I had cheering for me. And the more people I've uplifted, the more people I had uplifting me. And the more noise I made, the more others noticed me. And I've done that the right way by giving back in the process, by focusing on community. I'm the first skier to create we had run clubs, cycle clubs all around Cape Town, right after Chappies, etc. This didn't exist in skiing. I just took inspiration and I created, during summer, we had a thing called roller skiing, which I'm terrified of because I've only done it for 2 years and it's dangerous as hell. So to overcome my fears, I started a club where I got lots of beginners together, and every Sunday we went out together, called Rolls for Rolls. Roller ski for cinnamon rolls. And it became the biggest roller ski club in Oslo, technically probably in the world now. And now others have taken inspiration from that. Take the blueprint, go. Now I'm doing that in winter. Guess what it's called in winter? Wax for waffles. Ski wax for waffles. Anyway, that starts as soon as the snow is good enough to ski, right? Anyway, I started by getting the community behind me. And then, and my low moments when I wanted to give up, and there've been those, I had too many people asking me when I bump into the street, hey, how's it all going? Oh, yeah, it's actually not so great right now. Oh, really? Okay, why? And maybe give me some advice. So, yeah, I know it's tough for many to talk about something that's in the process and not done and finished yet, but I can only advocate for the benefit of speaking loudly about what you're doing. Social accountability, right? It's actually been very instrumental into me succeeding in this because I've told too many people I have to continue now in the low moments because trust me, you're not going to be able to motivate yourself all the time. That's an illusion.
Matt, been absolutely awesome. Obviously we're going to go and hit the prom now. But to close us off, if you could leave one message on the stage for your future self or your son, what would you want it to say?
You are more than your results. You are more than your results. I think it's a message that's not spoken about enough in sports. And every athlete is focusing on the hours that they train, but not every athlete is focusing on the hours when they're not training. That's where the difference is made.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Too.
That was awesome.